Hello, everyone. My name is Yihun Stith, a senior columnist for the Cornell Daily Sun. This week, I have the pleasure of switching from writing to a video interview with a very special guest. I'm joined by David Smolansky, who is deputy director of Venezuela's opposition party's campaign last year. Many reputable sources verify Smolansky and the opposition party's claims that they won the election against Maduro last year. Smolansky has been vocally participating in Venezuelan politics for a long time. In 2013, Smolansky became the mayor of El Hatillo. He was praised for his transparency and improving the city's safety. His outspoken opposition to Maduro's regime eventually forced him in exile into the United States, where he continues advocating for democratic reform and human rights in Venezuela. David, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk about your story and the broader struggle for democracy in Venezuela. First, can you share a bit about your personal journey in this fight? From what I understand, you were a student activist in 2007, and I think many Cornellians are really interested in student activism and civic engagement. So I think they'd love to hear, what was the journey from student activist to one of the most prominent figures in the Venezuelan opposition movement?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to be here at Cornell. I started in very young, when I was a student in college. I was a student of journalism. And Hugo Chavez decided to shut down the oldest and most viewed TV station in Venezuela. In that moment, obviously, it was a huge hit for a huge tackle, I meant to say, to our already fragile democracy. So we went to the streets peacefully and non-violently, defending human rights, freedom of expression, democracy. And even though I always wanted to be a public servant for my country, since I was a teenager, I was always very involved and interested in the things that were going on in Venezuela and also globally. Definitely that episode in 2007 accelerated my involvement in activism, in politics. And then after I finished college, I decided to run for mayor because I thought that was the better path to start my dream of becoming public servant, and especially doing it in the town that I grew up.
Amazing. So last time you were here was about 7 years ago at Cornell. And so the stat that you gave back then was migration was about 2.5 million Venezuelans had left. But that number has really changed. So can you help us understand how, since those 7 years, how the Maduro regime has changed Venezuela?
Well, I came to Cornell 2018. My exile was just beginning. I think I only had in the US 6 or 7 months, but I was always grateful that Cornell invited me when I was beginning my life here in the US. And the number have almost increased 4 times. Now we are close to 9 million migrants and refugees. Largest migration outflow right now in the world, even surpassing Ukraine that have been brutally invaded by Russia, and Syria, who suffer a civil conflict for 10 years. The people are fleeing the country desperately, first of all, to find freedom that we don't have in Venezuela, democracy that we don't have in Venezuela. Also, people are fleeing because of shortages of food and medicine. I have to say that 7 million Venezuelans cannot eat 3 times a day, which is the largest population in the Western Hemisphere suffering from food insecurity. Also, people have fled persecution, human rights violations, crimes against humanity, insecurity. Not many people know of this, but Venezuela is one of the most violent nations globally since this century began. And, well, the economy, which is, completely destroyed, especially because of the expropriations, confiscations, and nationalizations of the private property. So right now you see Venezuelans in Colombia, almost 4 million, in Peru, almost 2 million. In the US, there's more than 1 million. You have countries like Spain, Brazil, Chile, and Ecuador that more or less there are 500,000 to 600,000 Venezuelans. So people have gone wherever they can go. When you flee a brutal dictatorship, the one that we have fled, you don't choose where you go. You go where you can go. And I have always said that the only solution to stop people fleeing Venezuela is restoring democracy.
So I want to get into the specifics of maybe the specific activity that is going on in Venezuela. For example, I know a lot of the charges are narco-terrorism, but also Nobel Peace Prize winner and opposition leader, who you obviously know, María Machado, recently said, and here's the way the quote starts, Russian agents, Iranian agents are freely operating in Venezuela. Hezbollah and Hamas are located in our country. End of quote. Can you explain a little bit about maybe the different dangers that you see and if you agree with these statements?
Totally agree, and I have the honor to work with María Corina Machado running her international affairs office in Washington, D.C. So Venezuela have been basically invaded by external actors during the last 20 years. The first one that came from the very first day was Cuba, the Cuba of Fidel Castro, where it is estimated that almost 20,000 Cubans have been in Venezuela in these 27 years. Some of them, they say that they are nurses or doctors or teachers, but most of them are really intel agents that have done capacity building to the Venezuelan intel agencies and counter intel agencies to sophisticate repression. As we speak, there are now over 1,000 political prisoners in Venezuela. Some of them are very close to me, and as we speak, they right now have been tortured, including more than 100 women who have been sexually abused by security guards of the regime. So that's one external actor. The other, specifically the one you're referring, Russia. Russia is the main arms provider of Venezuela. At least $12 billion the regime have invested on buying AK-47, Sukhoi, and other military equipment. Iran is the second arms provider of Venezuela, and they are doing also capacity building to the security forces and also the intercontinental agencies. Also, Iran, as an oil country like Venezuela, has gotten involved on our oil sector, and the proxies of Iran, such as Hezbollah and Hamas, have used Venezuela more as an asset of, for example, getting passports. So they have more flexibility to travel globally according to different investigations that have been made. So when you see this dictatorship, how they have been able to keep in power, I'm sorry if I'm speaking too much on this question, is one, external actors is a pillar. The other pillar obviously is the repressive apparatus. And the third one is the illicit economic activities, which is the most important, is drug trafficking. I know that drug trafficking is a trend now in the US coming from Venezuela, but we have been suffering this for more than 20 years.
So I want to specify on the Hamas point and Hezbollah. So they are not actively part of gang violence or causing maybe rampant crime in Venezuela, but they're using it to get passports?
They are using to get passports. There are some investigations that, for example, on the east of Venezuela, some cells of Hezbollah have done some training to non-state armed groups that were created in Venezuela. The name of those non-state armed groups in Spanish is colectivos. So that's the link that they are.
Can you repeat the link one more time? I only ask because if it is true that they are located there, it then would give the United States more of a right to go in and do strikes in Venezuela.
Well, no one knows if that's going to happen, to be honest. Well, what I can tell you is this is a Venezuelan-led movement. We already decided regime change. What we have done is epic. Last year, we went to the most unfair and least transparent election that you can imagine, starting that out of the 9 million Venezuelans that could vote overseas, 4.5 million out of the 9 million could vote overseas, and we were illegally banned for voting. María Corina Machado was elected in a primary to be the candidate, and she was illegally banned for running. We had only during the campaign 120 members of our team illegally detained, including 5 that were held hostages in one of the embassies in Caracas, and obviously there was no access to media. So despite all of those obstacles, we won the election in a landslide, 70-30, 7 million to 3 million. We proved that we won with the voting tallies that people were able to gather. It has been proven and recognized by international organizations, by governments, by parliaments. Even the only observation that was allowed at Carter Center, that were basically expelled from the country when the election happened, they came and they said, the result that the regime gave is not true. So this is a Venezuelan-led movement. However, having a regime that has been in power for 27 years and they have not wanted to leave power, even though options have been given to leave power, and they are committing crimes that goes beyond a border, you cannot think that you can behave with impunity forever. So obviously the external support, diplomatically, among others, it's very important to put pressure on the regime to finally have them cracking down and having the transition to democracy.
So you mentioned external support, and you said possibly military and other. I want to specify. So recently, a few days ago, Dropside News reported that roughly 18 million in USAID funds were spent supporting Venezuelan opposition groups, including global travel for María Machado. Are you aware of any U.S. government funds received by your party or campaign?
That's not true, because María Corina Machado has been illegally banned for traveling overseas. María Corina Machado has not traveled overseas for 11 years. She's now in hiding as we speak. She's been hiding for more than a year. So those are reports that are completely false, because it is something more than public that you haven't seen María Corina Machado in New York, in Washington, in Bogota, in Madrid. Any appearance that María Corina has had in conference or in the university that she's going to have today or something is online, because she's illegally banned for traveling overseas over 11 years, and she's now under an illegal arrest warrant. That's why she's in hiding.
Are you aware of any other funding, though? Not so exclude the travel for María Machado, right? Say that is fake. Is there any other funding that your party or campaign has received?
I'm not aware of it.
Okay. And maybe more broadly then, if you were to come into power, and if your party was to come into power, you, as when you were mayor, you were praised for how transparent you were. Would you ensure transparency when maybe foreign governments or NGOs are involved in the future in your democracy?
Of course.
Okay.
I mean, we were one of the most transparent local governments in Venezuela when I was mayor, and that's not me saying it. It was the International Transparency, which is a global organization that have chapters in more than 100 nations, and they recognize that we were one of the most transparent. We were one of the most successful tackling corruption. And I'm very, very aware that one of the cancers that Venezuela has had during the last decades is corruption, money laundering, that have gone to the point now that there is illicit economic activities, not only drug trafficking, you have human trafficking, fuel smuggling, gold mining, among others. So, but also this is very important to understand for the U.S. audience. If an NGO, non-profit organization that, for example, promote independent media, or a non-profit organization is doing a very important job on documenting human rights violations that are happening in Venezuela, and they ask for grants, that's not illegal. That's not illegal. But also you have to be careful for them that anything that is said, they could be attacked, they could be threatened, because in Venezuela there is a law which is totally authoritarian that prohibits any funding, external funding to non-profit organizations. And if that happens, they will be heavily persecuted. That shouldn't be illegal if you are held accountable. So that's the situation right now in Venezuela. And by the way, many of those more than 1,000 political prisoners are human rights defenders and are journalists.
And then I just want to clarify. So you said you're unaware of any money from the U.S. government. How in touch are you with any of the funding that may come to your party or campaign? Or is that outside of your role?
It's outside of my role.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to ask about your experience being exiled, right? So you started in 6 months when last time you came to Cornell. It's been about 7 years since then. On Cornell's campus, we have students who had to migrate from Venezuela, both for other opportunities and some for, escaping the Maduro's regime. So last time you were at Cornell, it was 6 months, now approaching a decade. Do you have any words or advice for Venezuelan students at Cornell who are forced to be away from home?
That get the opportunity to study, that get the opportunity to work, that get the opportunity to speak and think freely, because we will need you when the time comes to rebuild the nation. I'm confident that the transition will begin soon in Venezuela, and as someone who was mayor with 27 years old, and many members of my cabinet even were younger than me, 26, 25, I truly believe on always involve young generations that could impact successfully on transforming public policies. So I want them back in Venezuela and be part of the rebuilding. We will need experts on education, on healthcare, on security, on energy infrastructure. Everything has to be done in Venezuela, but that will be probably the most beautiful project that we will participate in our life.
Now let's look ahead. If your movement was to take control in Venezuela, what would the movement's goals and policies be, and what do you envision that Venezuela would look like?
Well, definitely our priority is to have a strong and independent institutions. Second, guarantee access to justice to every Venezuelan. Third, defend and respect human rights. Fourth, guarantee freedom of expression. Fifth, obviously build a solid, stable, and prosperous democracy. Also, we will promote free market, respect private property, and have a strong economy. Also, we will create the conditions to have millions of Venezuelans that have fled to go back and be part of the rebuilding. And also, we have to work really hard on security. I want the people in Venezuela to feel safe and not feel threatened by the state.
And so I want to ask you, I'm assuming maybe there's some plans in place, because I know in other interviews you have said that the movement is ready. Are you aware of a possible role you may have in the next government, whether official or transitionary?
Well, the two parts of the question, yes, there is a plan, a big plan on economy, on energy, on healthcare, on education, infrastructure, on citizen security. And we are more than looking forward to starting implementing that plans that we have prepared for the transition. We want an orderly and democratic transition. I want to be crystal clear on this. And on my role, I'm focused now on restoring democracy in Venezuela. I'm focused now on the job that I have in Washington, D.C., representing the democratic movement, María Corina Machado, and President-elect Edmundo González, internationally. And then whatever they decide or the nation needs me, I'll be ready.
Amazing. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now I'm joined by Cole Laudenslager, the Cornell Political Union president, one of the organizations that brought David in. I wanted to ask you, why did you want to become the Cornell Political Union president?
Right. Thanks for having me, Yihun. So back in high school, I went to a high school that was, very one side politically. There was one predominant political viewpoint. If you had a viewpoint that was different than it, you were socially shunned and ostracized. As someone who, loves debate, policy, politics, advocacy, I was really looking for something more, to be able to challenge my beliefs or to challenge other people's beliefs respectively. So when I arrived at Cornell, the Cornell Political Union was the perfect avenue through which to do that. Seeing the wide variety of perspectives we have in the union. I mean, we have self-described Marxists, we have self-described monarchists, and everywhere in between. We have a centrist who abstains on half of our motions. So you know him. But it's just really been a great environment to test my own viewpoints, to hear others, and to be able to do so in a civil way. That's what the political union is all about. We can have stark disagreements, and they're well-informed disagreements, but we can do so in a respectful way and respect one another's shared humanity.
So I want to get your reaction. So many recent studies show that around 60% of college students are afraid of speaking certain political beliefs. I just kind of want to get your take on this alarming problem and how you think we go forward from this. Right.
It's absolutely a very pressing issue. I mean, if you look generally at the age we're in with political violence, the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, we live in an era where people take the humanity out of one another just because they disagree. They view different people as others as opposed to fellow humans. So I think it's very important to show that you can disagree but do so in a civil way, as I alluded to earlier. I think the best ways to solve this issue on college campuses particularly would be, one, to have more, maybe not viewpoint diversity of professors, but have professors show all the different viewpoints on a particular topic, whether they be orthodox, unorthodox, etc. And then a second one, I think the Cornell Political Union plays a large role in this, is bringing speakers to campus of all different walks of life, all creeds, all differing perspectives that can really produce a holistic picture of the issue at hand. That's what we're trying to do today with David. I'm really looking forward to our events there today, and I hope that they pry a door open and let someone ask some questions or think of some ideas that they hadn't thought of before.
Very interesting. So I want to ask, some people may look at David Smolansky, who was the deputy director of María Machado's campaign, and they may, one, think it's topical, but some may also think it's divisive. Mm-hmm. How do you think about these different issues? Do you consider divisiveness when bringing in speakers, when having conversations, or are you willing to bring in speakers that maybe other people disagree with to still hear their perspective?
Right. So on the first point, absolutely. One of the big things that we consider when we're bringing speakers is whether they're topical or not. The difficult thing is, we're planning these speakers months out in advance, so we're having to kind of game whether it's still going to be relevant in 6 months or so. And in regard to the, fight for democracy in Venezuela, regime change doesn't happen overnight. It's still going on. It's become even more relevant in the domestic politics sphere. Regarding, what was the second point? Regarding the divisiveness. That I wouldn't say that's something we consider too much. We love having speakers with very unique perspectives, even if they are a bit out there per se. But what we look for is intellectual backing. We don't want, a bomb thrower on the right or the left, calling the other side evil and just spewing political talking points. That's not what we're here for. That's, I think, what people often think of when they think of divisive. No, we are here for points that are intellectually informed and can back up, even if their views might be controversial, if they can back them up philosophically, theologically, politically, we want to hear from them.
So just as a follow-up on that, for example, David is a political leader who's the former deputy director of María Machado's campaign. Do you have any different maybe reasoning when you're bringing in maybe a political leader versus, for example, a scholar?
Right. I think both are extremely valuable, and we do have different expectations when we bring each of them. For an intellectual, they tend to approach these topics more abstractly, more on a holistic level, maybe slightly less biased than a political leader might, but the hands-on experience that a political leader has in an issue, like David, for example, fighting on the ground, is also very relevant to our members as well. They're both different perspectives. We bring both at the union, and I think they both bring value to our members.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carl.
Of course.
Thank you.